Hi, welcome to CAMIBAart Gallery and our latest showing of art with Rebecca Rothfus Harrell and her show Between. This show is on view through April 10th, and we are here today with Rebecca. She's going to talk with us about the show and talk about the inspirations for the work and some of the individual pieces. So we'll just dive into it. We're going to expect this to be about 30 minutes long, and we'll also be watching the video live on Saturday at 2:15. And if you have questions and watching it live with us, you can type them in the comment section and we'll try to reply to your questions. With that, we'll get started. So, Rebecca, thanks for being here. Hello. And I want to just dive into a little bit about this body of work. It's different from what you've been doing as far as theme goes or subject matter. But to give us some context into it, I want to talk about your background a little bit, and sort of the Cell Tower series, and then the Gemstones or Crystal series, and then also what's inspired you. So you want to talk, just sort of dive into that wherever it feels good, just generally wherever it feels good.
Well, for many years I did use Cell Towers as inspiration, and I found them really appealing because they're something you're not supposed to see, and I would see them everywhere. Mm-hmm. And when I moved to, I'd sort of been interested in them, and then I moved to Austin, and I kept asking people about the big flashing lights when you're on Lamar at night, and people had so many different explanations for what they were, or if they were defunct, and I mean, people just, they had their own stories, or they didn't see them at all. And you know, Westlake Hills is there, and of course these beautiful houses look out on blinking lights. And I just thought it was an interesting thing that people in Austin just are used to. And now I'm totally used to those lights, and I don't even pay attention. And the gemstones, the mineral structures, I was really, for many years, I was really interested in the shapes and the forms and how these tiny objects that could look like big abstract landscapes. And I think I'm kind of consistently interested in landscape and development and industry. I'm originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where there are a ton of bridges and the incline, and so all of that definitely has been of interest just visually since I was a kid. You know, what's that thing do? What does that do? Mm-hmm. Steel mills. And so in about 2014, I started to notice, in particular, driving down I-35, that there were these empty sort of frames, presumably old signs or a gas station that's closed and becoming something else, or switching gas stations, and I started to take pictures of them out of curiosity, and actually noticed that some of them sit there for a really long time, and they become this thing just like the cell towers that you're not supposed to notice, but when you have a sign in there, you are supposed to notice it. And one of the first pieces I started working on, or started thinking about and playing with in this series, is actually still empty on I-35. So I took the photo. I know, yes, it's very odd how they remain untouched, and I guess people drive by them and don't notice them, but I've kind of honed in on them, and as I've sort of gotten better at photographing them and paying attention to what I like about it, I definitely have pick and choose which ones I think are more interesting. Right. Yeah, because you can see a lot of empty signs. But
so you started thinking about this series or this body of work long before you were finished with your Crystal series.
Yes, I didn't know how it was going to fit in. Mm-hmm. Actually, similarly, my Cell Towers, I kind of was not secretly taking, but I was doing other art and not very successful. But I thought, well, what if I tried to draw one of these things? You know, is that interesting at all? So I was doing that I think I always do that. I'm very cautious, so having a safety net or being able to say, oh, that was during this time and it didn't work. Like,
right.
being able to clump it together and say.
So there's an overlap of your series where
Yes.
you're starting to play with some other ideas.
Yes.
Before but you're still working on what you know works and what you enjoy and what's.
Yeah, what's comfortable and then taking some risks and.
But you don't really mix them. Like this hasn't been mixed in with the gemstones.
No.
Or the crystals.
No.
And there weren't really any crystals.
I did think about it. I did a residency, or no, a 2-week workshop at Anderson Ranch Art Center with Amzie Emmons, who's amazing. And if you look at his work, you can see why I felt okay to like, ooh, let me try this crazy idea. I did try putting a building or a tower, an empty sign on a landscape, and I tried to combine them. It wasn't very successful, in my opinion, but it made me realize that that wasn't the way I wanted it to go. So that it resolved that question.
Well, and I think that's so you hit on a couple things there I want to dive into. One is that a lot of times your work, your bodies of work come out of residencies that you go to, and I don't know if they were born there. It gives you time to work on them. Is that kind of what it is for you? It's like an incubation spot where you can take these ideas and sort of bring them forward?
Yes, definitely. Anytime I have a set time frame that I can say, oh, here's my agenda for this experimentation period, I usually try something new then, kind of dip my toe in it. And yeah, the 2-week, there was a lot of technical stuff I was working on in that workshop, but
Is that the one where you started playing with flash paint? Or no, that was
a different one. That was Vermont Studios.
I remember that you came out of residency and you had like
using
a totally different medium. I was like, what is this?
And a different media and a different take on the subject matter. That was the Goldschmidt.
Yeah.
And actually, that series probably aligns more with this work in the way that it's structural, it flattens, it almost describes the thing. Unless you don't know what it is, then maybe you'll guess. I don't know.
Yeah, but it really is deconstructive almost, or diagrammatic of what the object is, as opposed to surrealist. You know, there's some surrealism in there, whatever you want to call it too. But it's not so much like a surrealist landscape as much as it is taking an object and trying to make a diagram out of it in some way or something. Right?
Yeah,
and that's what that series is like.
Yeah.
And so this came sort of gestated in a residency as well, right?
Yes, at the Wurlitzer Foundation in Taos, New Mexico, which is an amazing place.
And that was in 2018?
19.
19, okay.
So ironically, I went there September through December 2019. Fast forward to this crazy thing, and when I get back, this pandemic.
Yeah, that was right.
Yeah, I had come back. I was teaching, and then we all went to spring break and didn't come back to school. But suddenly, all of this started to connect even more because there are businesses that were tanking. I mean, just watching things drop like flies, and so oddly, it was very timely. For better or worse, but I dove in more once I got back and looked at local, not all, but I used some of the signs I had documented on my travel to and from New Mexico and some local ones too.
So you document them first. So these are all based on real signs out in the real world.
Yes.
What do you think? Which sign? What's on the walls here? Which one is most like in what's there in real life? That you feel like you took the least liberty as far as composition or shape or something on?
So partially, well.
They're all.
I mean, yeah, they're all.
None of them are this color, right?
Right. None of them are this color. That one's pretty specific. If I told you where it was and you drove by it, you would know. Now, if you've seen this. the one behind you is very specific because of
This one?
if you saw that sign, that little top part, you would recognize. And then the one to the left of that one is actually, it's in Taos, and I think because of the light bulbs, it was iffy for me to add in things like light bulbs or fabric or things that give a little more information about what it might be. I hadn't quite gone into that. So for me, those are the bigger signifiers.
Well, when I was asking that question, for me, I automatically thought about this one and then the other one over there where you have the light bulbs, because it felt like the most true representation of a sign with all its workings just hanging there. Whereas some of them, like, like this one, for example, could, without you knowing that these are about signs, you really don't get that that's a sign.
Right.
I don't think. You know, it's more of an abstraction, just color study, form study kind of thing. But then when you start to look for a sign, you're like, oh, I can see that there's a sign there.
Yeah.
But it's not quite so obvious at first.
Yeah, and I still kind of play with. I obviously did it. Those are the ones with the light bulbs are some of the more recent explorations. And I just started drawing some in my studio this weekend, and I was trying to make executive decisions about, do I show that little wire? I mean, I can see it, and sometimes I draw it in and then it'll disappear in the final, but this piece also, I struggled with it. I did it two different ways, one more realistic and one less so. It actually has a device in the middle that tightens it. So I did draw that once, and then the second time I took it out, which I like it better without. A while back when I was doing cell towers, people would say, "Oh, do you do the cell towers that look like trees, fake trees?" And I said, "Well, I did. I tried, but then they just look like really bad pictures of trees." So that's kind of how I felt about that one. Trying to be so specific then just made it look really. That became this awkward focus. But
right. It's like, wow, how perfect is that drawing?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like,
yeah.
And this one, right, is to me the most abstracted.
Yes.
Because until I saw the study of this, I really didn't even get it.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I totally did not. I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't wrap my head around how this was a sign until I saw the study, and then I saw the study. I'm like, oh, because I feel like the study has maybe more information in it.
It has the fixtures, and it's done this lovely piece 3 different ways. No, 4 different ways. I've never. So this was something interesting at the residency. I actually started with this, not this specific piece, but the first version of it, and I did it. And I thought, well, this isn't really working. So I actually stopped and didn't finish, which is not typical of me. I usually kind of just see the vision through. So I stopped that piece. I did another study, stopped that one. Then I did the small study and then the bigger one. It's been quite a journey, this one. And I have mixed feelings about it because of that. We have a love-hate relationship, man, this specific sign.
I think maybe that's why you didn't know you sent it to me.
I was in denial. I was like, oh, I sent it to him. I would not normally, but there's other ones that I sent you that I also didn't. They're not my top picks.
That's all right. That's why I get to curate the show, right?
It's good having a different perspective.
Because I love this piece, and I love the study of it too. And when it showed up, I was like, wow, I hadn't seen the photo of this one. You didn't send me a documentation of it. I was like, this is a nice little surprise. So do you do studies for all of them?
No.
Okay.
This piece in particular, I have 2 studies of it, and I drew that one. I did 2 big pieces and was very unhappy with it. I never finished Did I?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Send it
it's
to
back
me.
there. Okay.
It's back there.
See, again.
It didn't make it in the show.
Yes, again, love-hate relationship. So I was getting too sucked in to my head in the big size. I was trying to abstract it too much. So I thought doing a little study might help me figure out formatting more. They were really challenging. And then, yeah, I started and stopped, and I guess I finally and I blanked it out.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not a bad piece. It's just, when you're making decisions on what goes on the wall.
Yeah.
I felt like the studies were much stronger.
Yeah.
And especially in relationship to the other rules.
Yes.
Or sit on the wall. The color palette we used in the final one was a lot different too. It was more like that one. Yeah.
I
it
think,
was much more in that color palette.
Yeah.
Which gave it a much darker feel to me.
Yes.
And I wanted to, because we're dealing with a dark subject matter, when I was curating, I wanted to keep the color palette lighter. To sort of ease the pain of seeing these abandoned signs. Right?
Well, and I think that's a good point. Color choices, initially the color, you can kind of spot the ones that have to do with Taos because of the color. The subject matter came before, but I was there at a time when the rabbit brush is blooming and the sage is blooming, and it was fall, and I haven't seen a real fall in a long time. And there were these leaves that were crazy colors, and even the peach in this one is very much, I collected the leaves. They were these kind of almost see-through peach as they started to fade. So I was looking out at nature as far as color inspiration. It's not a stretch. Some of these colors I've used before. But when I came back, I did some others in that same color scheme. But you saying the thing about lightning, I did kind of go into a lighter color palette and less of a range of value. Mm-hmm. And for me, that was kind of a way to soften it somehow. So I haven't even thought that I've done that, but
now that you think through it.
I know, apparently I have.
Well, and there is a signature way you use color. There's something about your work that's got a very signature, I don't know what it is. I'm not going to be able to put words to it. But I think that it's definitely the way you combine your colors, and the way there's always this gray tones to it, the graphite, that adds the consistency from piece to piece. Yeah. But then there's also just this combination, this way you play with your colors in relationship to each other, which I think is cool. And when you see the studies of some of the pieces, and you can see you playing with the colors and what happens whenever when this goes darker and this gets a lighter tone on it, how does that read? I think of this one in particular, where you played with this yes. value on it. Right? I'm going to actually pull that one out real quick, so you can see this between the two studies, yeah. how it changes it by changing this tone and that tone. Yeah. I mean, the whole thing changed, yes, but just yes. really for me, those are the two big changes. And do you? Yeah. I mean, is that a process you think through that, or is it just sort of a gut and you just say, "What? I'm just going to put this here." How do you go about deciding that kind of thing?
So, both. If you look at those two side by side, one I'm trying consciously or subconsciously. On the bottom one, to me it looks more. It may not to you, but to me it looks more like a sign because I've blocked out the background. Yeah. What is the background, and it becomes this presence. On the one above, it becomes a space. So then it becomes architecture, or it's more about, is this solid? Is it transparent? So technically that probably makes it seem more like a sign, but in my head, the top one is playing with
space
more.
I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, and this one's more diagrammatic, like
Yes.
we were talking about, like, you know, the study of the object of a sign and diagramming it out. This is more of a study of landscape and space and dimensionality.
Yeah, so another one that I think is worth showing and talking about is station.
I just happen to have it here.
It was early on. It was early on in it was one of the first ones I did, and it's still one of my favorites because I think it does exactly what I was experimenting with in that last pairing with the play of space versus flatness, and it also reads as, when I've shown people, that it reads as architecture, and
right.
I've heard construction, I've heard houses, and I kind of, it's sad that happened right away, and I've been trying to kind of find my way back to that. Part of it is the shape of the sign too that plays with it, but I still haven't kind of found my sweet spot of how cropped, how much space, how much flatness, how much white space.
I have to disagree. I think you found that but I'm partial.
Yeah.
But I think for me as an architect, what makes this one feel like architecture more than some of the others is that there is a lot of vertical elements in it that feels like you're walking through a framed house.
Yes.
So you're kind of looking through all the various walls that are in different angles. And a lot of the other pieces don't end up with that much in it, so it's harder. Your mind doesn't put that together.
Yeah.
But I think that's another one that could be, if it was cropped in a little closer, could read as architecture. Right?
I'm really happy with this and the other one that is kind of the partner to this. I really loved how also the repetition, like picking and choosing, green here, different green here, gray. It's almost like a little game in my head. There's not a pattern to it, but I decide, I'll do that. And, that needs to be there. And just kind of, I don't know. It has a rhythm to it that I felt like was happening in Station as well.
And so you've always played with the idea of flattening of space and sort of this, where do you get dimension and where do you not? It was in all the other series I've seen. And it's something that the precisionists do as well, but it was something you were playing with before that, and you just saw them do it and went, oh wow, I love that.
Right. My undergrad thesis was in screen printing, but you didn't have to pick a major, but basically I did printmaking. So I think that's been a comfort place for me also. I like that matte, the flat. I also, printmaking, screen printing, you're doing section by section, working color by color. That might actually explain why I do some things the way I do. I hadn't thought about that. But yeah, you have to think about, you have to break down the picture into each of its color parts. My subject matter was totally different, but I did a very large series for my final exhibit. So I think that just kind of literally the printing became part of my art, that flatness. And then I was doing the cell towers, and there was an exhibit in Fort Worth of Charles Demuth, and I had not encountered him before. I had with the number 5 painting, that's kind of the famous one, that's the beginning of pop art. But I hadn't seen this other body of work, and it really hit home also because he was looking at Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and these steel mills, and the same kind of industry that I had seen, and he was using pink, and I had thought, could I use pink? I had been playing with that idea, and so that gave me the license to him having used it, seeing it in this museum context, and thinking, okay, there's something I like about this, I'll try it, and kind of got addicted from there. I love Charles Sheeler, I love them all.
Yeah.
And that show in Dallas was just like heaven for me.
Right.
The one at the Dallas Museum of Art recently. So good.
Yeah, and I think it's neat because you can see the relationship to your work. Your work is in that vein, but it's really its own thing altogether too. And it's like we were talking about earlier, is a lot more diagrammatic in some ways, especially in the series, which I don't know that any of their works were diagrammatic. Right? They were just about flattening a space.
Right.
But you never really
but they're
got.
very precise. I mean,
But
they are so precise.
They were so precise, but they were.
Yeah.
They never took the buildings apart.
Right.
There was never that decomposition,
Right.
Or reallocation of parts and places. I mean, they did play with colors like you do, as far as non-realistic. Like it's never going to be this color.
Right.
They would do that, right?
Yeah.
But
they're so good. I love it. Yeah.
What? So with this body of work where you are now, I know you're still working on pieces, and do you find yourself diving deeper into them or pulling back, or are you kind of doing both? Sort of?
Cropping wise, or
just sort of like I know that these are very very tight into the sign. Are you? I know that you, when your gemstone crystal series, you really dove into them sort of right towards the end, and I don't know if you're going deeper into the signs and you're going to crop in like this and start looking at that, or are you pulling out and starting to go out more landscape?
I'm trying to think of what's in my studio right now. A little bit of both, because I started cropping in very close, and then
I think that's an example, right?
Yes, ran into some. I like taking them. I like the tight cropping, but I hadn't quite resolved perspective or altering them, or how. I didn't think about framing originally either, which was kind of another thing that I do have in mind now as I make them. But I cropped in close, and the little studies, you'll notice they're more sign length, because I started to include, this one doesn't have the pole, but this has the two supports, even if it's just hinted at. So that one actually, the exact same piece originally was super close, and then I thought, well, what if I give it a little information? And then I don't know that I'm still on the fence about the light bulb and the recognition of what it is. So I started putting them in, but I can also erase them if I want. I'm still at that phase, or I can paint over them.
Do you do that? You paint over parts of the...
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That didn't look right. Sometimes, not over time, less and less with all of my artwork. And also the change in, that's worth mentioning, the change in surface. I use the same paper in the mineral structure, everything. I've always used one kind of paper. And I switched to a white paper. That's crazy. To me, that was crazy, but that's a big difference. And it changes the way the colors read as well.
Did the change in paper affect how it accepted the graphite and the paint as well?
Yes, actually, part of my exploration in Taos, and part of what took me so long to get the whole series done, for even what we have here, which to me is not a ton. I was exploring papers and wanting a thicker watercolor paper, but without the texture, and it was an interesting exploration. Another reason why I start something, restart, oh, I didn't realize that was going to show up in the watermark in that corner. So figuring that out was a big struggle. I had to, I have that little sample of all of my paints, and I had to do it on all the new paper. Once I settled on a paper. But I like it. I like the white paper.
Yeah, I really like the white paper.
Yeah. I guess since, I think it's been like 14 years. I use the same color paper. And I switched it up. So change everything all at once.
Well, I think it reads nice. But this is actually not, that's not the paper. Or is it that white is the paper? Mm-hmm. So that paper is that white. Wow. Because I was almost assuming that was a white wash or something that was on.
No, and I tried slightly off, and then I actually went brighter white over time.
Wow. It is white.
It is very white.
And you keep it clean. Wow.
Yes.
Amazing.
It is tricky. That's always a challenge with my work. Keeping it clean.
I've seen your studio. It's super clean. It never looks like anybody's using it. It's always so pristine.
I like to pick up.
Yeah.
That's
good. Well, I think we're going to leave it there. I don't want to keep running on to make it too long and leave some things for people to ask you later. So with that, thank you for the time today.
Thank you.
And we are going to schedule a day of appointments with Rebecca. So be on the lookout for an email about that and notes on our social media. We're hoping to do a day where we'll still be by appointment, no more than 4 people in the gallery at a time, but you'll be able to schedule an appointment while she's here and to dive in. And then, of course, we have our regular appointments Tuesday through Saturdays. Book them online, easy to make, and we would love to see you here. Again, the show is up through April 10th. Thanks for joining us.